Yeah.
Speaking of preservation, you've also been working with the Aga Khan Museum. You mentioned that earlier. What sparked that collaboration? And like, normally you don't see like uh people going in that route where like they start to get into that sort of realm of like preservation and like working with like institutions like that.
What sparked it was just the director of program, Amir Ali, also loves history and all kinds of styles of music. They have tons of different styles come through. Everything from like spoken word performances to flamenco performances to people coming in from Morocco, Spain, all over. And so yeah, he has a very sort of like wide appreciation for the arts. And it just occurred to me that most of the Pakistani stuff that ends up in Canada is normally pop oriented artists, not your traditional people so much. Sorry. Fareed Ayaz and Abu Muhammad have performed quite a lot in Canada and in States. But other than those two guys, you don't get to experience much more. So I kind of like wanted to bring in this idea that we have, because Shazad was relatively not a very known artist because he lives out in Shadra. Uh, he really doesn't have any releases as such, you know. So he's ostensibly a new artist. Of course, he's been singing for a long time, but people don't know of him. But hopefully that will change now. So that was the idea that, rather than just keep on flogging the classical thing that I had done in 2023 with them, with the Toronto based lineup, we would change the entire repertoire, come in with a completely new set of songs and a whole new range of material. Again, that's something that not typically a lot of artists do. They have like this one thing that they do and they keep kind of like touring that. But I wanted to have like a wider range.
So what's like Shazad's background in terms of like, like where did he learn music, or has his family been?
Yeah. His dad, his dad is Muhammad Bhuta Kawal, and he basically learned from his father, and it's been in his family for about a good 40, 50 years. His son also sings with him. So it's like a very much a family tradition. His nephews are also singing with him. So it's very much a family tradition with these guys. But a lot of Qawwali artists in Pakistan, as I'm sure you know, and it's really finding not just the right voice, but also the right guys that you can travel with and sort of like work with. And, there's so much of rehearsals and also finding traditional guys who are willing to sort of like learn about how songs are set up in terms of structure. Because when they're doing Qawwali, it's pretty much they're singing open, right? Things are not set out in like, oh, okay, when this happens, then you do this, right? You go to this section. I mean, they'll have cues, but those will be like real time, completely unrehearsed. But when you put a Qawwali into sort of like a song structure, where there's an intro and a lead in, and then there's a verse, and then, there's next, everything is more coordinated. So you have to find the right traditional people who understand those changes and who can also be flexible enough to understand how cues work and how sections work. And it takes time. And that's why you have to rehearse it so much. So it becomes smooth and seamless.
So when you look at the broader trajectory of the band itself, you've had different like really amazing sort of lead vocalist sort of situations, whether it was Javed Bashir or the early work, like, and I want to know, like, in your mind, like, what goes into like trying to create the best sort of situation to play music the way you want in terms of Mekaal Hasan band.
Well, I mean, the stuff that we were doing with Javed was actually so suited to his vocal style and his skill And I think it would have been, and it was hard to find people after him who could bring that kind of, authenticity and that kind of power to it. That was the challenge. So I, for my part, kept trying to find people who could do it. But honestly speaking, when you've made something where it's like everybody gets used to that sound and that lineup, especially with vocals, it's a bit of a it's always a challenge to kind of reinvent that with someone else. And it's unfair to the other person because they might be an excellent singer, but it could be that because people have heard it in someone else's voice, they'll always respond better to that. And it's not a matter of the new guy not having the skill or not having the talent. It's just the way people are used to doing it. So for me, doing this Nusrat thing is also really much needed change because I was getting really fed up of trying and retrying different vocal textures, different vocalists, and it's a lot of rehearsals. And music wise, this music is a lot more immediate and I think a lot more accessible than the classical thing we were doing, which was a lot more involved, a lot more technical, required singers and musicians who had a certain ability. Otherwise, you would really struggle with it. This one is more down home. It's more sort of like groove oriented. It still requires skill, but the aesthetic's slightly different because it's not classical based. The melodies are simpler. So it's not that complicated for people to sing along to because the melodies are much more hummable and those compositions are very catchy. So, it's got a lot of those positives. And this is partly why Qawwali is so popular as well, as opposed to classical music, because people can understand it and sort of like, imagine it and hear it back and sing along with it, which they always like doing, you know. So I think that's one of the reasons that there's an immediacy there, which with classical music, like I said before, you're more like as you're there as a passive sort of like a recipient of what's happening. And with Qawwali, you can actually sing along with it and sort of like get involved with it. And there's a back and forth. So there's much more of that sort of like call and response thing that you have with blues or with gospel. You've got that in Qawwali. And it's the only Desi art form that I know of which has that. All
That's
all the other all the other styles, Thumri, Ghazal, classical, uh, they don't have a call and response medium with the audience, but this one does.
yeah, it's just amazing to see your energy about this. Like, because I think, like, musically, like, you've always put your all into your music and you're very passionate about it. But I think, like, it's just this, like, jump in your voice when you're speaking about this project that comes across.
Yeah, I mean it's really fresh. It's fresh right now, so everybody is like enjoying it because I mean we've done the classical thing for so long, and we weren't exactly getting anywhere with it in terms of
It was
what I
also
could hope for.
it was also very, like, technical. You were pulling
Yes.
off, like, various traditions and, like, jazz itself, is a very
Yeah.
complex sort of
Yeah.
musical genre. Like, you have to be listening to it for a long time. Um,
Exactly. I mean, you have to have the. I mean, I'm not saying that it wasn't great to do, but it was great with certain configurations, and we had the best of that earlier on in our career. Like in the first 7 or 10 years was the peak of the band, and then after that, we were just trying to match up with what we had done before. And I think the 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 good thing is that I was aware of this that I needed to make a shift, and in fact, when Humera Channa was singing with us, we actually started doing more folk oriented songs because that was her forte, and she was a great singer. Like she was so good. And so with her, we were suddenly, doing more Sindhi folk tunes and doing more sort of like stuff that was not really hardcore classical at all. And that kind of like led to also now this Qawwali thing. It's all music. At the end of the day, it's all music and songs. And it's like I said, it's about finding the right people to run with. Because you can have a great singer, but you can not have the right songs for that person. Or you can have great songs, as is what happened with us. You can have the songs, you can have the amazing musicianship, but maybe not have the best suited voice for that particular thing. And that doesn't mean that the voice is not great. It just means for that particular aesthetic or particular requirement, it's not the best fit, even though it might be fine on its own.
Yeah, absolutely. So how has this like impacted your live performances? What has the response been in terms of your live performances? I know that last year you performed in Karachi after like 7 years, I think.
Yes, yes. We've had just fantastic audiences. Way better response to this Qawwali set that we're doing. Much more enthusiastic and much more sort of like people are like really loving it because I think nobody expected me to do this. Uh, but you kind of like get typecast as, oh, they only do this classical thing. But now that we're doing this, um, in fact, we recorded the live show we did in Lahore and we're supposed to release it at some point. You can see the audience response. And we just did this show in Karachi, and it was full house, like 800 people, absolutely like spellbound. And then like standing ovation and like really like the audience was at some points you kind of think that are they like are they enjoying it or are they just like kind of like just taking it all in and sort of like just going along with it. And sometimes you catch yourself thinking that same thing happened in Toronto. Uh, we essentially ended up selling out the first show, and then they added on a second show right after the first show, and that also sold out. So clearly, Nusrat's music and his legacy, and then of course the people who like what we do, it's a good combo.
At one point, I think like the band went through this very weird transition phase where you were performing with like different lineups essentially in different places.
Yeah,
And I thought there was a lot of promise with the lineup you were using in India. And
but you know what
because
happened there when the politics of the whole thing, what we never accounted for was that we just thought like, oh, we just want to play great music and bring our music to our friends in India and play it with them. And
because
that
they
was
have a
what
lot
the
of
initial idea
venues
was.
too, right? They have a lot of venues out there too, right? And
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, India, fantastic in terms of growth possibilities and appreciative audiences. Just, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like in Pakistan, we essentially have three major cities we can really perform in, right? There's Islamabad, there's Lahore, and Karachi.
yeah,
Those are the three that you could possibly really do stuff in.
yeah,
Um, and in India, you have something like, 28 cities like that, metros, where you've got educated audiences, you've got colleges, universities, uh, people with disposable income who love entertainment, who love music. So just it's an entirely different scale of engagement because let's say I was to do a show in Lahore, it would be very hard for me to keep on doing consistently shows in Lahore every month because people would stop coming after a while because it wouldn't be a something they'd look forward to. It'd be like, oh, it's on again. But so I have to space it out. I cannot perform um, more than like once in 3 or 4 months max. And so you have to sort of like rotate that, like you do something in Lahore and then people in Karachi hear about it, then you go there. But now you can't play there again for another 3 month period or at least a 3 to 4 month period, right? And then you take it to Islamabad and then you can't play there. You can't like come in and do it again a month after. And this is, by the way, I'm talking not about shows that are that are done by corporate interests. I'm talking about your own shows. Shows you set up yourself, you sell the tickets for, you book the venue, you do the sound, the production, the backdrops, all of that. All of that is a lot of work, right?
yeah.
And so you need to space it. And in a country like India, you have a lot more event companies, but you also have a lot more sort of like spaces to play in. So potentially you could be a Delhi artist and you could end up playing in Delhi maybe in January and not have to worry about playing there again till maybe June or whereas in Pakistan, If you play here in January, earliest you can play is maybe, April, you
Yeah.
know, and then you've only got really three major cities that you can look at. Whereas there you've got 28, 24, 28 cities. That's just the difference is huge.
It comes back to what you're talking about, that we're losing that, tradition completely, right? And
Oh, totally, yeah. Because we've gotten used to these corporatized shows over the last 2 decades. It's like all the shows are essentially food festivals in Pakistan. They're not music concerts. And essentially what we're seeing is that it's just these brands which are sort of like it's really they're doing it for advertising. They're not doing it because they love music. And so what we're seeing is that there's these festivals, but they're really food festivals, and it's always the same people who are appearing again and again, and those are your most commercial artists. Whereas in India, you have all kinds of festivals, and you have such a breadth of performers. Like if you go down to like the Jodhpur Riff Festival, that's got a completely different kind of lineup. And if you go to an NH7 festival, completely different kind of lineup. You know, but still massive crowds for both kinds of things. So one thing would be like the folk oriented thing festival. Other thing, or you got the Sampurna festival in Ahmedabad, which is 7 days of just classical music, also packed. So the diversity of taste is way bigger over there, simply because they keep investing back into it. And this is the problem with Pakistan, that we're not investing in anything. We're just taking whatever the corporate sector gives us and saying, "Oh, this is great." Of course, it's great. Like you don't have to spend a rupee on it. But the problem is that then it gets skewed after a while. You kind of notice the same people again and again, the same styles again and again. It gets very sterile and very generic quite quickly. The diversity gone.
yeah, I feel like also, there's a tendency to put this pressure on artists and like musicians, and like we should get the government to do something, right? Or we should get like, like artists to do something to like create a culture around music or art or something like that. And I feel like it becomes like a self-defeating thing, because like it's also a societal question, right? The question of
I think
culture.
that you kind of like hit a key point there, which is uh, a society which doesn't value expression and which only values material advertising is always not going to care about what people, artists, want to say. They only care about what makes them feel good. There's an entirely different set of values here, right? So therefore, if all you're interested in is quick fixes and quick solutions, and oh, this makes me feel good because it projects Pakistan in a very glamorous or a positive light. I'm not against that, but I am worried about the fact that if we don't invest in people who are not doing overtly commercial music, and if we fail to distinguish between quality and commercial entertainment, if we lose that distinction, which we have, then you're not going to be producing any kind of art. You're just going to be producing advertisements. And that's what I feel is wrong with the
Yeah,
current landscape.
like I remember
It's
like
been like that for a while.
when I was in like Denton, Texas, one of our anthro professors, took us to this area in Dallas, right? And there were these empty warehouses, and that's how the punk scene started, right? There was these empty warehouses because like, the industrial jobs and factories were going away. And, like there was a culture that built around that, right? And that's how like
Right.
punk music and that whole scene started. Like these guys would gather in these spaces and those things. And I feel like it's also a question of place, right? And, like how, society also must defend music, and things like that. And I think like our
That's
society,
exactly what's happening in Pakistan. There is no such sympathy. It's just that, oh, I will see whatever pops up on my smartphone or whatever comes on
like,
YouTube.
I personally
But
feel like weddings are like the only space where we like do dances or something like that. But there aren't places where people are just jamming on the street or like
no.
you know like you don't see any roadside people playing music or anything of that
I mean,
nature.
there's local variants of that. Like, if you go to a darbar or a shrine, you'll see some Qawwali thing there. But it's normally they're there because they're getting people to come and give them some food or some money. But there's no state narrative towards performing arts. It's been like that for years and years, and it just getting worse because it's not like the government doesn't, by the way, have funding for this. They do, but by the time it that funding reaches the institutions that are supposed to be doing these things, it's gone because it's either gone in corruption or it's gone into the pockets of officials who don't really want to spend it on the things they're supposed to spend on. A really good indicator is the fact that there's so many festivals happening all over the world, and Pakistan has representation on almost none of them.